The cardboard sign trembled in the cold December wind, its black marker letters barely visible in the dim glow of the gas station parking lot. Sarah Martinez clutched her two young children closer as another car passed by without stopping. Her son Diego, age 6, pressed his face against her worn jacket, while 4-year-old Isabella shivered despite the threadbare blanket wrapped around her tiny shoulders. What none of the passing drivers could see was that just 18 months ago, Sarah had been working as a registered nurse, living in a comfortable apartment, planning Christmas presents instead of wondering where her family would sleep that night. The cruel twist of fate that brought them to this moment began with a medical diagnosis that shattered their world. Sarah's husband Miguel had been diagnosed with aggressive cancer, and despite having insurance, the mounting medical bills and Sarah's need to care for him full-time had drained their savings and cost her job. When Miguel lost his battle 6 months ago, Sarah discovered that their medical debt was far worse than she had imagined. The apartment was lost, their car repossessed, and with no family nearby to help, Sarah found herself facing the unthinkable reality of homelessness with 2 small children. For 3 weeks, they had been moving between shelters, sleeping in her sister's car when space wasn't available, and trying to maintain some sense of normalcy for Diego and Isabella. Sarah had applied for dozens of jobs, but without a permanent address or reliable childcare, every opportunity seemed to slip away. Her nursing license was still valid, but she couldn't afford the professional clothing required for interviews, and the stress was taking its toll on her ability to present herself confidently to potential employers. On this particular evening, Sarah had swallowed her pride and decided to ask for help from strangers. The gas station was busy with holiday travelers, and she hoped someone might spare enough for a motel room where her children could have a warm bed and a hot shower. But as car after car passed by, her hope began to fade. Diego looked up at her with eyes too mature for his age and whispered that he wasn't hungry, even though Sarah knew he hadn't eaten since the small breakfast they'd shared at the shelter that morning. That's when former Marine Staff Sergeant James Washington pulled up to pump gas into his pickup truck. James, 38 years old with close-cropped graying hair and the bearing of a man who had served his country with honor, immediately noticed the family huddled near the entrance. Something about Sarah's posture caught his attention. She wasn't aggressively panhandling like some people he'd encountered. Instead, she seemed to be fighting an internal battle between desperation and dignity. Her children were clean despite their circumstances, and she kept them close with the protective instincts of a devoted mother. James had seen enough hardship during his 3 tours of duty overseas to recognize genuine need when he saw it. But more than that, he recognized something in Sarah's eyes that reminded him of his own sister, who had struggled as a single mother after her husband died in Afghanistan. The memory of his sister's pride and her reluctance to ask for help, even from family, made him approach the situation with sensitivity rather than pity. Instead of simply offering money, James struck up a conversation. He learned that Sarah was a registered nurse, that she had lost her husband to cancer, and that she was desperately trying to get back on her feet for the sake of her children. What impressed James most was Sarah's honesty about her situation and her clear intelligence and determination despite the overwhelming circumstances she faced. This wasn't someone looking for a handout, this was a hard-working American who had been knocked down by life's cruelest punches. James made a decision that would change all their lives. He asked Sarah and the children to join him for dinner at a nearby family restaurant, not as charity but as an invitation from someone who understood that sometimes good people need help through no fault of their own. Over burgers and hot cocoa, James listened to their story while Diego and Isabella slowly began to smile and laugh for the first time in weeks. Sarah was initially hesitant to accept help from a stranger, but James's respectful approach and genuine concern made it clear that his intentions were purely to help a fellow American in need. During their conversation, James learned more about Sarah's professional background and her desperate need for stability so she could return to work. As a construction contractor who had built a successful business after leaving the military, James understood the importance of having reliable, trustworthy people in his life. But more than that, he was moved by Sarah's unwavering dedication to her children and her determination to rebuild their lives despite facing seemingly impossible odds. That night, James made an offer that would test Sarah's pride but ultimately provide the foundation for their family's recovery. He owned a small 2-bedroom house that he had been renovating as a rental property. Instead of finishing the project and renting it to strangers, he offered it to Sarah and her children as a temporary home while she got back on her feet. The house needed work, but it was warm, safe, and most importantly, it would give Sarah a permanent address and stable environment needed to restart her career. Sarah's initial reaction was to decline, feeling that she couldn't accept such generosity from someone she had just met. But when she saw Diego's face light up at the mention of having his own room again, and Isabella's excited questions about whether they could have a Christmas tree, Sarah realized that her pride was less important than her children's well-being. She accepted James's offer with the understanding that this was temporary help, not permanent charity, and that she would work to repay his kindness however she could. Moving into the house was an emotional experience for the entire family. Diego immediately claimed the smaller bedroom and began arranging his few possessions as if they were treasures. Isabella discovered a backyard where she could play safely for the first time in months. Sarah found herself crying tears of relief and gratitude as she realized her children would have a stable home during the holidays. But James's kindness didn't stop with providing shelter. Understanding that Sarah needed professional clothing for job interviews, James quietly arranged for his sister Rebecca to take Sarah shopping, framing it as a favor between women rather than charity from a man. Rebecca, who had walked a similar path as a single mother, became an instant ally and friend to Sarah. The shopping trip provided not just the clothes Sarah needed, but also the confidence boost that comes from looking professional and feeling prepared for success. Within 2 weeks of having a stable address and proper interview attire, Sarah received 3 job offers from local hospitals impressed by her experience and qualifications. She chose a position at the regional medical center that offered good benefits and scheduling flexibility for a single mother. Her first day back at work was emotional as she realized how much she had missed using her skills to help others, and how the experience of homelessness had given her even more compassion for patients facing their own crises. But the most unexpected development was the relationship that grew between James and Sarah's family. What had begun as a good deed evolved into a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. James found himself looking forward to having dinner with the family, helping Diego with homework, and reading bedtime stories to Isabella. The children began to see James as a father figure, while Sarah discovered that it was possible to find love again after loss, though she was careful not to rush into anything that might jeopardize the stability her children desperately needed. The transformation was remarkable not just for Sarah and her children, but for James as well. His own life had been focused entirely on work since his military discharge, and he had been struggling with a sense of purposelessness despite his business success. Helping Sarah's family had given him a renewed sense of meaning and connection to his community. He realized that true success wasn't measured just in financial terms, but in the positive impact you could make on other people's lives. As Christmas approached, James insisted on celebrating with the family, but Sarah surprised him by insisting on cooking dinner herself. She wanted to demonstrate that she was capable of contributing to their friendship, not just receiving help. The Christmas dinner they shared was simple but filled with genuine warmth and gratitude. Diego and Isabella had made handmade gifts for James, who was moved to tears by their thoughtful gestures. Sarah gave him a framed photo of her late husband in his military uniform, with a note thanking him for honoring Miguel's memory by taking care of his family. 6 months later, the transformation was complete, but the relationship had evolved into something beautiful and lasting. Sarah had not only regained her financial independence but had been promoted to charge nurse due to her exceptional skills and dedication. Diego and Isabella were thriving in school and had formed a strong bond with James, who had become a permanent part of their extended family. The house James had provided as temporary shelter had become a permanent home when Sarah insisted on purchasing it from him, wanting to build equity for her children's future. The most significant change was in James himself, who had discovered that his greatest purpose lay not in building houses but in building relationships and supporting his community. He had started a non-profit organization to help homeless veterans and their families, inspired by his experience with Sarah and motivated by his understanding of how quickly circumstances could change for good people. Sarah volunteered at the organization, using her medical skills to provide basic healthcare to people experiencing homelessness. Their love story unfolded naturally over time, built on friendship, respect, and shared commitment to family and service. When James proposed a year and a half after their first meeting, it was with Diego and Isabella's enthusiastic approval and participation in the planning. The wedding was a celebration not just of their love, but of the power of kindness to transform lives and create new beginnings from the ashes of tragedy. The ripple effects of James's initial act of kindness extended far beyond their family. Sarah's colleagues at the hospital were inspired by her story and started a program to provide professional clothing and support to healthcare workers facing temporary hardships. James's construction company began hiring homeless individuals and providing them with temporary housing while they rebuilt their lives. Diego and Isabella, having experienced both poverty and generosity, grew up with deep empathy for others and a strong commitment to helping their community. Their story became known throughout their city as an example of how Americans take care of each other in times of need. Local media covered their nonprofit work, but James and Sarah always emphasized that they weren't special or heroic. They were simply people who understood that everyone faces challenges, and that with a little help and a lot of determination, anyone can overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The true measure of James's heroism wasn't in his military service, though that was admirable, but in his willingness to see Sarah and her children as fellow human beings deserving of dignity and support. He recognized that homelessness doesn't discriminate and that good people can find themselves in desperate situations through no fault of their own. His decision to help wasn't motivated by a desire for recognition or reward, but by the simple understanding that we all have a responsibility to care for each other. Years later, as they watched Diego graduate from high school with plans to attend college on an academic scholarship, and Isabella perform in her school play, Sarah and James reflected on how their chance meeting had changed all their lives. Sarah had gone from desperation to fulfillment, not just as a mother and professional, but as someone who had rediscovered hope and love. James had found his true calling in service to others and had gained a family that filled his life with joy and purpose. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that heroism often looks like simple human kindness. It doesn't require grand gestures or public recognition. Sometimes being a hero means seeing someone in need and choosing to help rather than look away. It means treating people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. It means understanding that any of us could face hardship and that our strength as a community comes from our willingness to support each other through difficult times. The incredible thing that happened when James helped a homeless family wasn't just that their lives improved. It was that his life was enriched beyond measure, that their community became stronger, and that their story inspired countless others to look for ways to make a difference in the lives of people around them. True heroism creates ripples of kindness that extend far beyond the original act, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand but that make our world a better place for everyone. This story reminds us that we all have the power to be heroes in someone else's life. Every day presents opportunities to show kindness, offer help, and treat others with the dignity and respect that every human being deserves. We never know how one moment of compassion might change not just someone else's trajectory, but our own as well. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories for more inspiring tales of human compassion and resilience. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that good people still exist and that hope can be found even in the darkest moments. Together, we can create a world where kindness is the norm rather than the exception, and where everyone has the chance to rebuild and thrive regardless of the challenges they face.